Right. Greetings, everyone, and welcome to worship at Unity Church. Welcome to this time we set aside each week to join as a free and inclusive religious community that supports our search for greater truth, meaning, and equity. We stand on the homelands of the Dakota and Ojibwe nations. We honor with gratitude the people who have stewarded this land throughout the generations and their ongoing contributions to this land today. We acknowledge the ongoing injustices that we have committed against the Dakota and Ojibwe nations, and we wish to interrupt this legacy, beginning with acts of healing and honest storytelling about this place. This morning we worship both in person and online, a congregation gathered in time rather than in a single place. But I will say it is a joy to see how full this single place is today. Thank you for being here in person and online. May we all enter into worship fully, not held back by fear or distraction or the unfamiliarity of new ways. Welcome whatever arises in your spirit during this time we share. If this is your first time attending a service, I want to give you a heads up. This is my last service here, and I might be likely to cry. That doesn't always happen in the pulpit, but sometimes it does. If this is your first time attending a service here, we invite you to complete a visitor card available in the pews and online so that we can provide you with more information about our congregational life. I also want to name something that is not in the program today that normally would be named. The flowers on the chancel today are a gift from Kate Murrah in memory of her husband, Jim Nair, whose memorial service was held here tenderly and well attended yesterday morning. So thank you, Kate, for that. After the service, Merrill and I look forward to greeting those of you who are here in person. And we invite you to continue on into Parish Hall, where we will have a brunch and a farewell celebration. All are welcome. Please come and join this celebration. We know Bugs is here. Those joining us online are invited into a Zoom coffee hour. And now, let us enter into worship with the ringing of the bell.
Good morning. What an honor it is to be here for the last of Karen's services after she has served this church so exceptionally. And in that spirit, this morning I'm going to ask you to do something. Please close your eyes if you're comfortable doing that. Imagine it's a clear and moonless night. Overhead is an impossible field of stars. Some parts of it are so dense, they seem like a cloud. Other parts are pitch black. And in between each of those millions of stars is another. And behind that one, 1,000 more. And now in your mind's eye, look down. There's a stone at your feet. The stone is encrusted with lichen, crusty and leafy. You become small, and you can inhabit it. It has strange alien stalks, punctuated with grays and deep yellow. And now, if you feel comfortable, join us back here in the sanctuary on Portland Avenue. The poets and the scientists among us, and you and I, travel through this same world, experience the same trees, sky, rocks, buildings. But in some way, it's a work of imagination to see those things more deeply or in a new way. As Margaret Fuller wrote, "Are the stars too distant? Pick up the pebble that lies at thy feet, and from it learn thee all." Come, let us worship together. remain standing and join in the responsive reading, number 648 in the back of the hymnal, Beginners. But we have only begun to love the earth. We have only begun to imagine the fullness of life.
How can we tire of hope? So much is in God.
How can desire fail? We have only begun to imagine justice and mercy.
Only begun to envision how it might be to live as siblings with peace and power, not as oppressors.
Surely our river cannot already be hastening into the sea of non-being.
Surely it cannot drag and still all that is innocent.
Not yet, not yet. There is too much broken that must be mended.
Too much hurt that we have done to each other that cannot yet be forgiven.
We have only begun to know the power that is in us if we would join our solitudes in the communion of struggle.
So much is unfolding that must complete its gesture. So much is in love.
Each time we gather for worship, we set aside a moment to expand the caring ministry of this congregation. Together, we recognize the cycle of life and death, the circle of love, compassion, and witness that is at the center of this and every sacred community. We stand at the side of parents and teachers and all those whose primary spiritual practice is caring for children. With those who live with grief or chronic pain, with illnesses seen and unseen, with mental disability or addiction. We pray for our neighbors in prison, for those who care for family members in ill health, and those who are struggling to stay afloat in the midst of poverty. Our lives are blessed by those who knowingly and with curiosity and courage face their final days, and by those who rise above heartbreak to challenge oppression in all its forms. We pray for those in harm's way, for the wisdom and strength of the leaders of the world, and for the people of this courageous congregation as together we live into our longing to embody and help to build the beloved community. And will you pray with me now for these we name today? We celebrate with Stephanie Clausen and Bill Nelson as they prepare to take their marriage vows here at Unity Church this coming Saturday. After 6 years together and several seemingly insurmountable challenges, including the loss of Stephanie's 3-year-old son, Davin, they are overjoyed to celebrate the threshold of marriage. They are deeply grateful for the dedication and support of this congregation and its staff over all these years, and would like to extend an invitation to the Unity community to attend their ceremony on Saturday at 4 p.m. in the Ames Chapel. After the service, after the wedding service, not this one, they will hold a dinner off-site for family and close friends. We hold in our hearts and extend our sympathies and love to Kate and Tad Jennings, following the death on June 3rd of Kate's mother, Sue Pearson. Sue died of kidney failure at the age of 96, and Kate reports that her mother was reluctant to go and kept trying to recover as she had many times before. Kate says dying was her mother's greatest challenge. And we hold in our hearts with sympathy and love Laura Tamale and her family as they mourn the unexpected death this week of Laura's brother, Brian David Kindig, at the age of 52. Brian suffered from mental illness and addiction for many years and is remembered now in sorrow and with love by Laura and Mike and their children Joey and Claire, as well as Laura's wider family, including Brian's 5-year-old daughter, Skylar, and her mother, Lisa, and Laura's father, David, and brother, Mark. A memorial service will be held here at Unity Church in the future. Finally, as the broadcasts continue this coming week from the House Select Committee hearings on the January 6th U.S. Capitol attack in 2021, we pray that the light of truth will shine and that a path forward might be opened, honoring the work of the committee, acknowledging the suffering of those harmed in the attack, and addressing the threat to democracy and our governmental systems that it presented then and still poses today. May truth preside. May our commitment to the democratic project in the United States, flawed as it has always been, be renewed in ways that might allow it to be more fully realized in the future than it has been in the past. May we stand in compassionate solidarity with our neighbors here at home and all around the world. May they and may we be instruments of a just and lasting peace. I now invite you to speak aloud or hold in the silent sanctuary of your hearts the names of those you would like to lift up today in worship. Good. And will you pray with me? Holy One, source of all being and promise of all our becoming, Spirit of life and of light embedded in each one of us, what if we opened our hearts to that light today? We come together, many of us, with heavy hearts, over the world's violence and terror, over lies spread in our nation by greed and cruelty, over the losses we have suffered personally and collectively. Comfort our sorrows and hear our fears. Remind us that beneath the brokenness of this time are buried the sacred sparks of a light that might guide us. Open the eyes of our hearts to see the holiness shimmering in each one of us. Open the ears of our souls to hear the symphony that beckons us. Open our lives to those around us, sharing this moment, this world, this journey with us. Help us to recognize and welcome your holy presence, shining whenever we uncover our own light, whenever we help others to uncover their lights, wherever we reach out across what separates us from one another. May it be so, and amen.
Good morning. Today's response song is the bridge from the song Turn the World Around. So I'm going to teach it to you so that you can sing it with me. So it goes, do you know who I am? Do I know who you are? Let's just sing that. And the words are printed in your program, but they're easy to remember. So it's, and do you know who I am? Do you know who you are? Good, let's try that again. And do you know who I am? Do you know who you are? All right, then the next one is, see we one another clearly. Do we know who we are? Ready? See we one another clearly. Do we know who we are? Good, let's try that again. And see one another clearly. Do we know who we are? Let's try the whole thing. Ready? And do you know who I am? Do I know who you are? See we one another clearly. Do we know who we are? You got it. All right, so I invite you to stand in body or spirit, and we have what we're calling the pickup choir, who is a group of people that just met an hour before the service to learn some music today. So they learned another part that they're going to layer on top of what you just sang. So here's what we'll do. We'll sing through it twice all together, and then pickup choir, you can add the part you learned, and we'll sing that all together twice while the congregation keeps the other part going. So 4 times total. Are you ready? Here we go. Do you know who I am? Do I know who you are? See we one another clearly. Do we know who we are? Do you know? Thank you, everyone.
Good thing to learn together, isn't it? Thank you to the pickup choir. What a gift to have you all singing with us today. Your support of the church is an expression that we make, an expression of the promises we make to one another and to the world. The contributions you make each Sunday enable us, the contributions, here, I've only said this a million times. The contributions you make as congregants enable us to offer the majority of the Sunday offering to other organizations that share common cause with us. So, if you would like to nominate an organization to receive the Sunday offering, you will find a way to do that on the website or by contacting one of the members of our generosity ministry team. Today's offering has been nominated by me, and it will go to the Eastside Freedom Library, which is in my neighborhood. It is a beautiful organization dedicated to the profound power of storytelling, to bridge our differences, to build solidarity, to create community among us and across the differences that so often divide us. This is an organization I hope to volunteer for once I have more time. So, Please give generously to support this cause. The library that it is in is the old Arlington Hills Library on the east side. The organization is now in its 9th year and soon to announce new leadership. And so this contribution today from the offering will be a vote of confidence in its future and the future leaders that come. Will the ushers please come forward? We dedicate these offerings and ourselves to the greater work of the church, which is weaving a tapestry of love we call community.
Our community has had a bit of a tough stretch. I've been grappling with the meaning of our ministerial vote and meeting, in part by returning to a work I have loved for many years called 1,000 Plateaus. This book makes a plea that we question our culture's tendency to explain everything by forcing it into the shape of a tree. A single narrative with a hierarchical structure, forcing our thought ever into this one shape just doesn't work for many real situations. The book is also a plea for embodiment and lived experience over abstraction. The authors suggest that we instead begin to think like rhizomes, like raspberries, iris, or bamboo, spreading runners out in a way that better honors multiplicity. In that spirit, I bring you this story about lichen. Before about 1870, botanists thought that lichen were a sort of plant. They seem like a plant. Many of them are shaped like plants. But the advent of microscopy and study by a Swiss botanist named Simon Schwendener would change that understanding dramatically. Studying lichen and comparing them to other plant life, Schwendener came to a new and profound insight that lichen not only were not plants, but that they were in fact colonies of two radically different life forms, fungus and algae, living together in a cooperative relationship. It was astonishing. This idea was resoundingly rejected by much of the scientific community at the time, who thought it far-fetched and lacking in common sense. Once his idea was proven correct, it was named symbiosis by another scientist studying lichen, Henrik Anton de Berry. This word to describe cells or organisms collaborating in a relationship later became a common way to look at such systems and is also found in many other places in nature. For hundreds of years, we lacked this fundamental understanding of what lichen were, or that they could even be this far-fetched, composite, interrelated thing. It took reimagining what was already there in front of us to understand. And lichen are not unusual or some edge case. Lichen come in a huge variety of forms. A recent study described in the Stanford University Earth Matters magazine found more varieties of lichen than there are birds. But this new understanding of symbiosis meant we'd been wrong for many years, and it was revolutionary in its deeply imaginative rethinking of what this life form could be. Textbooks had to be rewritten. But hang on to your hats, it still wasn't right. In 2016, scientist Toby Sprirbilla, I have the honor of the most difficult names this morning, revealed that there were still gaps in this story of lichen and that DNA analysis had led to another startling insight. It had seemed that if lichen really were these colonies, then in a lab, one ought to be able to introduce the two life forms together and have them form a lichen. But that didn't work. With a partner, Sprirbilla was studying something very specific, as described in an article in the Atlantic magazine. Quote, the duo started studying two lichens that are common in local forests. One is yellow because it makes a strong poison called vulpinic acid. The other lacks this toxin and is dark brown. They clearly look different and had been classified as separate species for almost a century. But recent studies had suggested that they were actually the same fungus partnered with the same algae. So Why were they different? It didn't make any sense. This puzzle caused them to re-examine a lichen that we thought we knew. Scribilla ultimately found that these two lichen were different from one another because they are not just a collaboration between two forms of life, but among three. In order for this lichen to form, it was necessary for three forms of life to actively collaborate together. And as he widened his search and his view, he found this was not true only of this example, but also of all of the largest group of lichen species. Textbook writers, sadly, would have to rewrite the textbooks again after 150 years. For me, this story is inspiring not only because of the immense and intricate beauty of this world, but also it's a reminder that there are things right here in front of us, interrelated things, subtle relationships and dependencies that maybe we have not yet found the imagination to see.
But we have only begun, says Denise Levertov in the poem we read together earlier. We have only begun to love the earth. We have only begun to imagine the fullness of life. What does it mean to imagine the fullness or the wholeness of life? What does it mean to be at the beginning of that, when maybe we thought we'd be farther down the road by now? What does it mean to revisit a poem written 40 years ago about beginning and still now be at the beginning? Today, as you and I say our goodbyes and part ways, at least for a while, it might feel like an ending, but we know that all endings are also beginnings. We are all embarking on a journey that begins today, as it does every day, and like all journeys, it begins in the ground beneath our feet. In this month's focus on imagination, today we consider what is called prophetic imagination, which is really just a theological way of saying, what if? It is an act of faith that considers the realities of the ground beneath our feet and invites our imagination to open a path forward toward something new. Prophetic imagination asks us to believe that the world need not remain the way it is, or indeed the way we think it is, as Merrill's story about the lichen illuminates. Sometimes prophetic imagination is the profound act of letting go of our assumptions and assertions, long enough that we might discover an unexpected truth in the ground beneath our feet, even if we have to rewrite the textbooks. What if we regarded this ground here, now, beneath our feet as the sacred ground it is? This ground, meaning the floor and foundation of this sanctuary, holy and steeped in well over a century of worship, of praise and lament, of song and silence. This ground, meaning the land of the Dakota people on which this building stands. And this ground, meaning the earth itself and the wider ecology of being that holds us all. All of it, the sacred ground of being that contains past, present, and future all at once. What if we honored that as the beginning of the journey we set out on today? What fullness of life might we begin to imagine And what wholeness might we remember if we open our hearts to that? Join me in a bit of time travel today, asking the prophetic question, what if, as it relates to the past, the present, and the future. We begin with the past. In the beginning, as the ancient Jewish story tells it, for a long, long time, as far back as time can go, there was only darkness. A bountiful, holy darkness made of Ein Sof, the source of life itself. And then, in an instant, everything changed when a great light emerged in the darkness. And in a divine accident, the vessels carrying the light broke. In that moment, the world as we know it today was born of the shattering of wholeness, a scattering of light into uncountable shards. Slivers of light embedded in everything, sparks buried in every place, every event, and every being across all time, including you and me today. Stardust, we might call it, hidden beneath the surfaces that we often regard as the real world, covered up by the dust of daily living and by form and the names by which we call it. In this story and the teachings of the Kabbalah from which it comes, it is the task of humanity to find these shards of light and make them visible again, to uncover them and help them shine, thereby restoring the holy wholeness of the world. It is a task you may have heard of by the name Tikkun Olam, often referring to justice work and meaning restoring the world. Significantly, this task is not and cannot be completed by anyone individually or by any people in any single time. It is the work of all of us, of our ancestors, of those of us alive today, and of those yet to be born. It is the shared task of all of us to heal the world, not by extraordinary acts of heroism, but by each one of us unmasking the light within us and uncovering the light buried in those around us. That might sound simple, even joyful, but it can also be difficult and even vulnerable, because the shards of light within us will not shine through the armor of certainty and pride and our attachments to being right. It will not shine through the shields we raise to keep others at a distance for any reason. Uncovering the sparks within us and in others required that we set down our guard long enough to let our light shine and to look for the holy light in others. In my time with you here at Unity, on staff for the last 3 years and for 9 years earlier as a consulting literary minister, I have witnessed you doing this work all the time, lifting your own lights up to be seen by others and celebrating with others when their lights are uncovered. We have seen this in worship when the worship associates tell stories from their own lives. We have experienced it in chalice circles when we've heard each other speaking from the heart. We've marveled at it in the miracles happening every Sunday in our religious education program as our children lift their lights and let them shine. And we have witnessed it in our community outreach teams as they speak and act for justice from the ground of faith and the ground of an open heart. So it is that we are beginning to imagine the fullness of life, the present. Let's face it, the present we are in is especially challenging, bringing significant lessons in what separates us one from another, perhaps more often than lessons in what unites us. The pandemic taught us we must sometimes wear masks and keep safe social distancing from one another. Meanwhile, the polarization of our times has widened the psychological and spiritual distances between us, reinforcing them with labels we use for others that mask their humanity, with opinions that we let harden into armor, with roles we play that become conflated with our identity, whether they're roles as allies and accomplices or roles as adversaries, roles as citizens and immigrants, or roles as people who voted one way or another. Have you felt the brokenness of a world constantly divided in these and so many other ways between us and them? In the words of Levertoft's poem, there is too much that must be mended. Too much hurt we have done to each other that cannot yet be forgiven. We have only begun to know the power that is in us if we would join our solitudes in the communion of struggle. What if? What if the beloved community we seek to make real is not some paradisical absence of conflict set in the future, but the act of connecting to one another across our differences here and now on this ground, as we join our solitudes in the communion of struggle? Seeing the holy spark in one another is easy when we like what we see covering those sparks. But how do we open the aperture of our hearts to perceive the holy spark in those with whom we deeply disagree? This space between two people, whether of like or different mind, need not be a battleground. In fact, in many religious teachings, it has long been regarded as the very place where the holy resides. Right here in the communion of struggle. Right there where two or more are gathered. Right there where we meet one another in the unguarded terrain of stories that are still in progress, still being imagined and written, beginning with the words, "What if?" It is said that in many medieval monasteries, the monks would greet every stranger arriving at their door, saying, "Oh, Jesus Christ, is it you again?" What if we did that with everyone we encountered, looking for the holy shard of light within, and did whatever we could to uncover it? This is what the greeting namaste does, doesn't it? That beautiful sacred greeting that in some countries is used to say both hello and goodbye. Nodding, bowing humbly to the other, requiring no handshake or any of those things we've had to give up because of COVID. Saying namaste, meaning the holy in me sees the holy in you. I want to ask you to try this right now. Wherever you are, turn to the people on either side of you, in front of you, and back of you, and simply look them in the eye and say namaste and mean it. Go ahead. And those of you online, go ahead and text somebody namaste. What if we did this all day long? Seriously. practiced it in each of our encounters, calling up that holy spark within ourselves to meet the holy spark in others. What joy and energy of connection might we uncover, like wholeness restored, like vessels of light repaired, like healing. Since moving to St. Paul, I've made a young friend down the street from my house. He's now about 8 years old and is often waiting for the school bus in front of his house or playing in the front yard when I walk by with my dog every day. We talk for a few minutes, always happy to see each other. And then last Halloween, I answered the door with a basket of candy in one hand and looking out at this small group of costumed children in front of me, their parents a few steps behind. And they offered that chorus of trick or treat. And then one costumed child flung up the plastic mask on his face, and he said delightedly, "It's you!" And I was ridiculously happy about this, overjoyed to be seen by this young one as his friend, to be seen as a treasured encounter, and I felt the light of holy connection between us right there on our front stoop, amidst all the Halloween ghouls and skeletons and jack-o'-lanterns, right there. What if we could see one another like that? Masks flung back, delightedly shouting to one another, "It's you!" The future. Sometimes it can be hard to imagine a better future when the present is so filled with loss and disappointment, with grief and fear. Then I think of this story told by a Holocaust survivor about the French poet Robert Desnos and his time in the Nazi concentration camps. One day, the poet and a large group of other prisoners were loaded up into the bed of a large truck, which they understood was taking them to the gas chambers. The group was somber and silent. As they arrived and descended from the truck, no one spoke, not even the guards. But then Desnos broke the silence. He jumped down from the truck in a wild and foolish energy. He grabbed the hand of a fellow prisoner and turned it palm up and looked at it closely and said, "You have a very long lifeline, and you are going to have 3 children." In the utter despair of the moment, the poet's excitement became contagious. One prisoner after another held his palm up to the poet, who gazed into each hand and proclaimed his improbable predictions of longevity, of countless children, and abundant joy. And the mood began to change, not only among the prisoners, but among the guards as well. Who could have imagined this happening? Who could have seen it coming? The men's death, which moments before had seemed so inevitable, appeared almost absurd in the face of the fortunes now being told. The disorientation became so great that the guards were unable to go through with the executions. Instead, they loaded all the prisoners back up on the truck and drove them back to the barracks. Now, in all truthfulness, I have to disclose that in the end, Desnos did not survive the camps, but died of typhus a few days after liberation. I do not for a second want to suggest that imaginative thinking is all we need to change the world or our own lives. But what I find in this story is the way in which an opening toward a different future can be created, beginning by saying, "What if?" To imagine, writes the author Susan Griffin, is not simply to see what does not yet exist or what one wants to exist. It is also a profound act of creativity to see what is. What if? The singer Namali Brennett speculates in our postlude song today. What if we're stars? Maybe we're just one of a million tiny galaxies hurtling on towards some unrevealed destiny. Throughout much of known human history, people have looked to the stars for direction, for orientation, for foretelling the future even. But what if we're stars? What if we're orbiting one another in constellations that are forming and reforming every day, in new mythologies that explain those changing constellations? What if you and I are not just here looking up at the Milky Way in the sky, but what if we too are stars shining across distance and time toward one another? In a symphony of light and history, a firmament of relationship and wonder. What if we are stars? Shards of light buried in each one of us, revealed when we see one another in our wholeness, in our holiness. What if we began to imagine the fullness of life and of our shared light? One of the things I will miss as I step down as your minister is the view here from this pulpit. This view of your faces on Sunday morning as you create a firmament of light. That I remind myself it's a view that doesn't require a pulpit. It's a view that you all just had as you turned to one another and said, Namaste. It's a view we all have, living together in community and creating it as we go, writing a new story together as stars in motion, making new constellations as we meet and rearrange ourselves in new patterns, in new habits of love and remembered wholeness. What if we saw one another as the shards of light that we are, shining across time, across distance, across difference? This, my friends, is a glimpse of the beloved community we seek to make real. What if we open our hearts to that, hidden here in the ground beneath our feet, where the past and present and future all meet? Recently, I read these words by Alexis Pauline Gumbs, and they made me think of you here at Unity Church and about saying goodbye to you now. She wrote, "It was always you I loved, not your elegant strategy. I will love you now and still if you outgrow it. I will love you more whether time moves forward or back. There are at least 3 ways to love you: as you were, as you are, as you will be. I love you. I choose all 3. I'm going to leave the pulpit now, but I'm giving a note, a heads up to Ahmed that I'm not done with the sermon. As you know, the end of this service marks the time when I step out of my role as your minister. A new minister will arrive this summer, will take up the role of your associate minister. And as that happens, in the comings and the goings of all the ministers in this congregation, Do not confuse your ministerial leadership with the true light of this congregation. It resides in you, in all of us. Each of us, regardless of our roles, by the very fact of our being, and by the very beautiful and challenging practice of letting our light shine with one another and committing ourselves to see the holy light in one another and doing what we can to uncover that light. That is the work of this and every sacred community. What if this is our task? What if this is our guiding light? What if this is the holy love holding us all in a firmament of beloved community, in a circle of love? So may it be. Namaste and amen. Song, Break Not the Circle of Love, which was written by someone, interestingly, Fred Kahn, who was born in the Netherlands in 1929 and lived through the Nazi occupation, saw 3 of his grandparents die of starvation, and witnessed his parents joining the resistance. Out of that context and lived experience came this beautiful song we sing today, Break Not the Circle. Friends, will you join me in this love? There are at least 3 ways we can love each other: as we were, as we are, as we will be. Let us choose all 3. May it be so. Blessed be. Now, I have to say, things are a little different right now. We have a recorded postlude. I had hoped we could have Namali Brennett here to sing this song herself, but she is touring in Europe, so she gave us permission to play it recorded. It is the song Stars. The lyrics are printed in your order of worship. So we will play that here in the sanctuary and online, but what I want to say to you is there will be nobody up here performing. So Merrill and I are not going to recess as we usually do. We're going to come down and usher you out. And if you choose to stay seated and listen to the music, you may, but I encourage you to enjoy this firmament of light in which you are all a part as the music plays. And when we are all out of here, as you exit, please go in. They are ready to serve quiche in the parish hall, and I will be in there, Merrill and I will be in there to greet you in the parish hall afterwards. All right.
Maybe we're just one of a million tiny galaxies hurtling on towards some unrevealed destiny. Maybe we're somebody's unfinished symphony. Maybe we're the defenders of the indefensible, just trying to make some sense of the incomprehensible. And what if we are? What if we are stars? Maybe we're the victims of reincarnation. Maybe we're the phantoms of manifestation. And maybe we're just here to fix our mistakes again. Maybe we're planets like Venus and Saturn, surrounded by gases and protons and atoms. And what if we are? What if we are only stars? And maybe this world is just thinner than it seems. Maybe we're all partners in the same lucid dream. Yeah, well, maybe we're vapors. Maybe we're just steam. Maybe we're creatures of habit and malice, pale in the light of aurora borealis. And what if we are? What if we are only stars? Only stars in the dark. Just a spark. lucky and blessed to bear witness to the flashing of this meteor, the tail of this comet. Maybe we're cursed, maybe we're fortunate. Maybe we just go on a milky right way. Maybe we got to stay.